The panic didn't start when the book was announced. It didn't start when the excerpts were printed. It started when one very specific question, a question that had been floating around the shadows for years, suddenly appeared in mainstream print, reviewed by editors, checked by lawyers, and published where it could no longer be dismissed as internet gossip. And that's when everything changed, because this story was never just about a book. It was about what the book made acceptable to talk about. And once a topic becomes acceptable to talk about in mainstream media, it stops being a rumor and starts becoming a problem.
But I have to just say, anyone who has doubted me over the past decade about this evil woman now needs to eat some humble pie.
The reason why these pictures are so problematic for Meghan Markle is because these pictures place her with Jeffrey Epstein.
Meghan is at the bottom of the barrel.
In fact, I've seen the tapes. I've got them somewhere. God knows where now. I've got them on some old...
So you've seen Nudie Rudy Meghan too?
I've seen more than one thing.
She's a con artist.
It was really important to me. I remember where I come from.
It's going to be explosive.
I tried so hard.
Let me take you through what Tom Bower has revealed. He's told the Daily Mirror, "I've got a lot of new material already, and I think the whole world wants new insights. It's an amazing story."
Yesterday's breakdown opened a door, but today's story walks straight through it, because something about the reaction didn't make sense at first. Criticism had been coming for years from every direction: journalists, biographers, family members, commentators, and it was always ignored. No aggressive statements, no emergency PR responses, nothing. Silence. But then suddenly, before a single copy of Tom Bower's new book even shipped, an aggressive statement was released calling it a deranged conspiracy and melodrama. Not after publication. Before. That's not a normal reaction. That's not damage control. That's fear control. And the question is simple. What exactly were they so afraid of?
I can't wait to read this. There are many, many unanswered questions when it comes to Meghan Markle.
Because when you actually follow the timeline carefully, something very strange appears. The serialized excerpts that were published covered multiple sensitive topics: isolation, warnings, charity issues, reputation damage, but they didn't cover the one topic that had followed Meghan for years like a shadow that refused to disappear. And yet, that was the topic that suddenly appeared somewhere unexpected. Not on social media, not on a gossip blog, in the Spectator, one of the oldest magazines in the English-speaking world. Established, lawyered, reviewed, and right there, printed in black and white, a question that had lived on the internet for nearly a decade suddenly crossed into mainstream print. That moment matters more than people realize, because once a question is printed in a publication like that, it means editors believed it was legally safe to print, and that changes the entire game.
For so long, there have been rumors that many of us believe are true, and I think someone like Tom Bower can get these across the line and get them in print and prove that they are true.
4 days after the excerpts hit newsstands, that column appeared, and buried in the middle of mockery and criticism was one line that detonated like a quiet bomb. Not an accusation, not a claim, a question. How many yachts was she a guest on before she met her prince? Double figures or triple? That was the line. And the moment that line appeared in a 200-year-old publication, the story moved from the internet into the historical record, because for 7 years, mainstream media refused to touch that topic. They treated it like it didn't exist, and then suddenly it existed.
The Yacht Girl. Oh my God. Ghislaine Maxwell spoke. She said so. Virginia Roberts spoke. They both talked about Meghan Markle, but the world chose to ignore it. And even now, with these pictures out in the public domain, the press still refuses to expose Meghan Markle.
Something is going on. And Meghan and all the things that she has done to, pull other people down and to question them and their behavior. Well, let's continue to turn the tables and talk about you, Miss Meghan Markle, and what you have done.
Now, here's where things get uncomfortable, because the column didn't prove anything about Meghan's past, but it proved something else. It proved that the media was no longer afraid to mention it. And that's a much bigger shift than people understand, because media silence is not the same as media ignorance. Sometimes silence is a decision, and when that silence ends, it usually means something behind the scenes has changed. And right as that silence ended, another name started resurfacing again and again. Soho House, not just as a place, but as a network, a social infrastructure, a gateway into elite circles. And at the center of that network was Marcus Anderson, a man who wasn't just a friend, but a connector, the logistics man, the introductions man, the man who knew everyone and moved people into the right rooms at the right time. And that's not speculation. That part is documented. He was there before the royal relationship. He was there during it. He was at the wedding. He was at the baby shower. He was in the background of everything. Not the matchmaker, but the infrastructure, the bridge between worlds. And when you start looking at bridges instead of people, the story starts to look very different because bridges connect two sides that would otherwise never meet.
The key line there, and the line that really, really interested me, was not a question about whether she was a yacht girl, but just simply stating as a fact and then asking, was it double figures or triple in terms of how many yachts she was a guest on before she met Prince Harry?
For years, the yacht questions lived in anonymous forums and independent media. Easy to dismiss, easy to ignore. But once that question appeared in print, the conversation changed from is this internet gossip to why is mainstream media suddenly willing to print this now? That's a completely different question because media institutions do not take legal risks for fun. If they print something sensitive, they believe they can defend it. And if they believe they can defend it, that means they believe there is enough publicly documented material to justify printing the question. And that's when Tom Bower's role becomes important because Bower is not a YouTuber, not a blogger, not an anonymous account. He's a forensic biographer with a track record of investigations that hold up under legal scrutiny, which means when his work enters the conversation changes level. It becomes documented, structured, sourced, and suddenly a topic that lived in the shadows for years starts walking into the light piece by piece, name by name, connection by connection. And once that process starts, it's very hard to stop because investigations don't work like rumors. Rumors disappear. Investigations accumulate. They build, they connect, they create patterns. And once people start seeing patterns, they start asking questions, different questions, bigger questions. And the biggest question in this entire story isn't whether the rumors are true or false. The biggest question is why the response has always been silence on this one specific topic while everything else gets a denial. Because silence is not neutral. Silence is a strategy. And sometimes silence is a tell. And the deeper you go into this story, the more the timeline starts to matter, the more the connections start to matter, and the more certain names keep appearing over and over again in the background, like pieces of a puzzle that don't look important until you see the full picture forming. And when you finally see that picture, you realize this story was never just about yachts. It was about proximity, power, access, networks, and the one moment when all of it almost ended up being discussed in a courtroom under oath. Think about the sequence, because the sequence is where this story becomes uncomfortable. The lawyer said she could be a potential witness because she was in the United States, because she had known Prince Andrew socially, and because she could potentially have seen or heard things relevant to the case. Those were the reasons given, not gossip, not tabloids. A legal strategy discussion connected to one of the most high-profile civil cases connected to Jeffrey Epstein's network. And then something happened that changed the entire trajectory of that case. Prince Andrew settled quickly, reportedly for millions. The case never reached full discovery, and the depositions that were being considered never happened, which means the questions that might have been asked in a legal setting were never asked in that setting. The door opened, and then the door closed before anyone walked through it. And when you start lining up the timeline, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Photos appear, connections appear, names repeat. Soho House, Marcus Anderson, elite parties, international travel, powerful friends. None of these things are crimes. None of these things are illegal, but they are proximity. And proximity is what investigators, journalists, and lawyers all look at first, because proximity tells you who was in the room, who knew who could introduce who could connect who. Networks, always networks. Power doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in circles, in invitations, in private rooms, in social clubs, in yachts, in parties, in charity galas, in private member clubs where introductions are currency. And then comes the photo, the yacht photo, the one that went everywhere, the one with the Mediterranean sun and the group of women smiling at the camera. That photo became a battlefield overnight because one side said it proved everything and the other side said it proved nothing. And the truth ended up sitting in the middle, which is where the truth usually sits. The photo was real. Meghan was on the boat. The trip happened. The location matched. The timing matched. August August 2016, right before the relationship with Harry became public. But one crucial part of the viral claim, the identity of one of the women, turned out to be wrong, misidentified, debunked. And that debunk mattered because it showed two things at the same time. Some claims were exaggerated or false, but the core photo itself was real, which means the real story didn't disappear when the misidentification was corrected. It actually became sharper because now the question wasn't about a fake photo. The question was about a real one. And that's the pattern that keeps repeating in this entire saga. Every time something false gets debunked, the verified parts remain. The yacht trip remains. The Soho House network remains. The introductions remain. The timeline remains. The legal discussion about a potential deposition remains. The settlement remains. The silence remains. And silence over a long enough timeline becomes part of the story whether anyone wants it to or not. Because here's the pattern that nobody can ignore anymore. When other allegations appeared over the years, bullying claims, interview claims, family disputes, responses came quickly. Lawyers responded. PR teams responded. Statements were issued. Very specific denials were made. But on this one subject, the yacht questions, the Soho House network questions, the proximity questions, there has never been a direct specific denial addressing those exact claims point by point. Instead, the responses always attack the author, the journalist, the commentator, the motive, the narrative, the tone, everything around the claim except the claim itself. And when you see the same response pattern repeated over and over again across years, across countries, across different media outlets, it stops looking random and starts looking like a strategy. And then something else happened that made this situation even more volatile. The mainstream media environment started changing. Commentators who once defended Harry and Meghan started criticizing them. Publications that once ignored certain topics started mentioning them. The Overton window, the range of what is allowed to be discussed publicly, started moving. And once that window moves, stories that were once untouchable suddenly become discussable. And once they become discussable, they become investigatable. And once they become investigatable, more names come out, more photos come out, more timelines come out, more people start talking. Not all at once, slowly, piece by piece, like a wall cracking one line at a time until one day the entire structure gives way. At some point, the story stops being about whether one specific allegation is true or false. It becomes about the pattern, the network, the proximity, the silence. And the moment mainstream media decided it was finally allowed to print the yacht question in ink with lawyers approving the text, that was the moment this stopped being an internet rumor and started becoming a mainstream narrative. And once a narrative reaches that level, it doesn't disappear. It grows, it spreads, it gets investigated, it gets documented. And eventually, whether anyone likes it or not, it gets answered. Because the real story here isn't just about the past. It's about why the past suddenly became impossible to keep in the past. And when you look at the timing, the books, the lawsuits, the settlements, the photos, the columns, the statements, the silence, it all leads to one uncomfortable possibility. This entire story isn't coming out now by accident. It's coming out now because the protection that once kept certain questions out of mainstream media might not be there anymore.